How's it going, y'all? Titan Smash MTG, and today we're going to talk about some of the mechanics of Adventures of the Forgotten Realm, the upcoming D&D set. We got the full spoiler coming out here in just a few days. I'm already starting to brew on some new standard decks. So the next video after this one will be my 10 decks for standard, as I always do. And even though I don't expect a lot of these things to like super C play, again, just because Throne is so powerful, this set actually looks super cool. So I think even before rotation happens, we can still do some neat things here. At least that's what the hopeful me is going to say. You never know. Like, we can... Obviously, there's the best decks that's already established. They're probably going to take over, but we can still have some fun brewing some of these stuff and trying some new things out. And then, especially once rotation hits, we got a lot of cool stuff to play with here. But enough about that. We need to look at this set going forward here, so we might as well dive into the mechanics. Take a little bit of a look at each one of these, talk about what they do, whether they're like strong mechanics that they can see viable play in standard or not. So let's jump into it here, talk about those. Let's go! So it wouldn't be a D&D set without talking about dungeons, so we're going to head and jump into the first mechanic here, which is venture, which is to venture into the dungeon, which means you either enter a dungeon of your choice. As you see here, there's 3 different dungeons. Either enter a dungeon of your choice or advance to that dungeon if you've already chosen one. So let's look at Tomb of Annihilation, for example. Say your creature, you've either entered the battlefield and triggered this, or you've attacked, or whatever your creature has to do to venture into the dungeon. You get to do the first thing in this room. So for Tomb of Annihilation, if you trigger this, you would have a trapped entry. Each player loses 1 life. Easy peasy. Say it's the next turn, you go to attack, you have a creature that says every time you attack, venture to the dungeon, like Triumphant Adventure, for instance. You attack, you get to choose which of the rooms you go into. So you can choose Veils of Fear here, and you can go to this room where each player loses 2 life unless they discard a card. Or you can choose Obulette, which is to discard a card and sacrifice an artifact, a creature, and a land. Obviously, the Obulette one is way more risky, but it advances you kind of like 2 rooms there, so it's kind of cool. So you just have your different pathways to take with this. Each different dungeon has their own little layouts. Some have way more rooms than others, but at the end of it, there's different rewards and such too. So kind of depending on your playstyle and what your deck wants to do, we'll kind of consider, what dungeon you want to choose and what kind of deck you want to do. I think this mechanic is super neat. I love that these don't take up a sideboard slot or anything. They just kind of sit in your command zone outside of the game. Whenever you want to do these, you can choose them. So it's kind of free value in that way. I know a lot of people's worry about this set is, it's just been introduced in this set, so obviously nothing before this is going to have venture. Will this be viable enough to work? And while I don't think you can make a full-on venture deck, even though I'm going to try, even though you can't make a full-on venture deck, it turns out from seeing in some of these spoilers that there's some cards that I feel are just good enough on their own, but they happen to venture anyways. So you got to talk about, even if it's a small little thing. Say you're choosing one of these, you can scry one. And then you do it again, you get to create a 1/1 goblin or maybe create a treasure token. That's kind of text that would already be added onto a card, which is pretty good in itself. So when you're doing all these other things, that incremental value really adds up there. So I think Dungeon is going to be actually better than people think, just because a lot of people are really sleeping on it. This is kind of similar to Companions in a way, where people just really underestimate the value of free value. And whenever you can do some of these things where they don't take up, Companions took up sideboard slots, but when you have things like this that are essentially just free value on the sidelines that you can pull in if it happens, it's super cool, and I think it's going to be better than people think. I don't think you can just build up like a straight up venture dungeon or anything like that once again. But if you can, hey, that's super cool. A lot of these cards, they care about completing a dungeon. If you complete the dungeon, then you get these big ol' effects. So it's a really neat way to build it. Very cool design. I love this. Hopefully it's something they move forward with in the future, because I think stuff like this is super cool. So next up, we have roll a d20, and it's about as simple as it sounds. You roll a d20 for a lot of these things. So for this example, look at Contact Other Plane, 3 in a blue instant, roll a d20, lands on 1 through 9, you draw 2 cards, which already, draw 2 for 4, that's a pretty, that's like a pretty common cost for the effect kind of thing. If you get 10 through 19, you can scry 2 and then draw 2 cards. Again, that's Glimmer of Genius, that's Behold the Multiverse, that's things that we're kind of used to seeing for this kind of mana cost. But, let's say you get lucky, you hit that nat 20, scry 3, then draw 3 cards for 4 mana, that is super good. And it seems like all these cards are pretty much laid out the same way. There doesn't seem to be, for most of these cards, no bad effects if you roll a 1, which is kind of odd. But basically, if you roll low, then you're just getting the bare bones version of whatever this card value is. But if you can get a 15 or above on a lot of these, or especially if you hit the 20, your effect is really good. Obviously, you've got a 5% chance happening. I think, again, I like stuff like this. I think it's a fun way to do stuff without being super overpowering. I'm glad they didn't make it, this kind of thing where you just win the game if you roll a 20 or something like that. There's some of these cards have been previewed that do look pretty strong with this. That could be a little bit scary. But as a whole, I do like this kind of thing and like this mechanic. I've seen a lot of people complain and cry about how they don't like variance in the game. Don't know what game y'all been playing, but it's a very variance riddle game in the first place anyways, and that's just part of it. So If you don't like variants, this game's not for you in the first place, bud. But I think this is a cool thing to add to the game. I'm really a fan of a mechanic like this, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see the post on the Facebook groups and whatnot of people complaining that this is rigged and, oh, my opponent rolled 4 different natural 20s in a row. No, they didn't. Stop. And if they did, you just got really bad luck, I guess. But things are going to happen like that. But this is going to lead to some really bad moments for you. But also, I can imagine those times where it's like, hey, I got to roll this 20 to get out of here. And it happens. It's going to be super cool, which is just how it works in D&D too. So again, very cool mechanic. I like this. The flavor's on point, and I think this is implemented really well. Another kind of mechanic we have here is flavor words, and I can't full on call this mechanic, but it is worth mentioning. You'll notice a lot of these cards here are modal, and this is essentially just modal cards. There's a bunch of modal cards in this set, but with it being D&D, they put some nice flavor on it, or it kind of acts like a stereo D&D where you walk into a dungeon. So, say this one. You lift a cursed idol. 1 in the green, sorcery, choose 1. You can smash it, destroy target artifact, lift the curse, destroy target enchantment, or steal its eyes and create a treasure token and venture into the dungeon. So you have all these different modal things. Essentially, this reads just like a card. Choose one of the following, blah blah blah. But they made it fancy and snazzy. Again, this doesn't break the game at all because it literally exists in all kinds of stuff, anyways. But they added some D&D flair to it. And I think this is a very neat way to, you're putting some spice and giving some variety on this set without actually breaking anything. This exists, this is nothing new, but it's a new way of pushing it and doing it. I think it's super cool. So the last thing we'll talk about here, and something that just got revealed as of recording this video today, is classes. Classes are enchantments that look just like sagas, but basically you pick, you have your cleric, wizard, warlock, all these different kind of classes like you'd have in D&D. You play these enchantments and you have a level 1, a level 2, and level 3. So it's essentially the level up mechanic, but with enchantments. We'll look at the wizard class, for instance. It's a single blue mana. Level 1, you have no maximum hand size. This is what happens for the rest of the game as long as this enchantment's out there. If this gets removed, you lose all of this. But while this is on level 1, you have no max hand size. If you want to level up, you do all these things with sorceries, which is important. Don't be thinking you can do this on your end step or something. But say for this one, you can pay 2 in a blue to go to level 2. When this class becomes level 2, draw 2 cards. So you can draw your 2 cards while still having your maximum hand size, because you got to think of it like you're in D&D. You're leveling up your class, you're getting a little bit better, so all these kind of proficient traits that you learn from level 1 still stay there for level 2. Finally, you can pay 4 in a blue to go to level 3, all these max out at 3. Level 3, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Every turn you're putting a counter on something. If you're drawing cards at instant speed, you're doing this. This is sweet. All these kind of things at level 3 get really, really strong. Some of these things get really expensive to do that. Other ones are pretty cheap and just not much investment to it. I think this is a really neat idea. I love the design of this. Again, I like the art style and the way this. I've always been a fan of sagas anyways. So the fact you have like sagas and level up mechanic kind of having a child together and being one is super neat. So again, flavor home run, knocked it right out of the park. And I'm not a big D&D fan. I played it like once. I respect it, but it's just not been a thing that I have the consistent time for to play. But from a flavor perspective, it seems like they knocked most of this kind of stuff out of the park. And I'm a huge fan of it. I love it. So, well done, Wizards. Pat on the back to you. This is actually pretty sweet. So that's what we got here for the mechanics in this set. We have other things. There's a bunch of different dragons. There's the mythic enchantment style things. There's all kinds of weird, wacky stuff out there. Not going to get into all of that. But let me know what you think of the set so far, what you think about its power level, and what you're looking forward to playing. As I said earlier, we'll have our 10 decks of standard coming up here, so if you're ready for that, that's always a big video for me. Always appreciate all the support I get on that one, and I love making these things. And this is the last one we'll be doing before rotation, so I think we're all at that point where we're very ready for rotation, so let's go for that. But thank you all for watching. Appreciate the support. Let's go.